There's no light between any of us. We're shoulder to shoulder to protect the people of the United States from this evil, evil drug, fentanyl.
The press conference was brief, but the numbers were staggering. 64 pounds of fentanyl, enough to kill an estimated 14.5 million people, had just been taken off Florida streets. And at the center of the announcement stood Sheriff Grady Judd, who didn't hesitate to name the enemy. This poison came straight from the cartels, from Sinaloa, from Jalisco. They want your kids dead, and they want your money while they do it. The bust, part of a months-long joint investigation involving the Polk County Sheriff's Office, the DEA, and Homeland Security, marks the largest fentanyl seizure in Polk County's history and one of the largest ever made in the state of Florida. The fentanyl was found in multiple forms: pressed pills, many disguised as oxycodone; loose powder, highly potent and lethal in micrograms; vacuum-sealed bricks, each marked with coded cartel symbols; liquid fentanyl vials stored in false bottom containers. What shocked authorities wasn't just the volume but the sophistication. According to Judd, the traffickers used commercial airline flights, false IDs, shell businesses, and even modified car batteries to smuggle drugs from Mexico through Arizona and Georgia, and finally, into Florida. The operation was codenamed Project Sentinel, and it had been running quietly for over 8 months. It all began with a routine traffic stop outside Winter Haven, where deputies recovered a suspicious package containing what appeared to be prescription pills. Field testing revealed it was fentanyl enough in a single Ziploc bag to kill over 50 people. That stop triggered a cascade of surveillance, controlled buys, wiretaps, and confidential informants. Authorities tracked bulk shipments to Phoenix, handoffs in Atlanta, and money drops in Tampa Bay. By the time the bust was executed, 7 individuals had been arrested, with more indictments pending. All were believed to be directly linked to cartel operations based in Mexico. Several suspects were found to be in the country illegally. Others had prior drug trafficking convictions in the U.S. Sheriff Judd was direct. These aren't local dealers. These are international killers. Every brick they bring in is loaded with death, and they know it. That's the business model: profit over life. One of the most chilling discoveries was a hidden compartment inside a family SUV. Inside, officers found 5 kilos of fentanyl pressed into blue tablets. The driver? A 34-year-old man traveling with his 6-year-old daughter in the back seat. He had her watching cartoons while he drove with enough fentanyl to wipe out a county, Judd said. You want to talk about evil? This is it. The seized drugs were taken to a federal evidence lab for full analysis, but officials already confirmed that some of the powder batches were among the strongest concentrations ever tested in Florida, up to 50 times more potent than heroin. The street value of the total seizure was estimated at over $9.5 million. But to Sheriff Judd, the cost wasn't measured in dollars. We didn't just stop a shipment, we stopped a slaughter. Operation Sentinel is now being used as a case study for interagency coordination and will likely inform state policy moving forward. Officials credited Florida's SAFE program, statewide arrest and fentanyl enforcement, for providing the infrastructure to act fast and aggressively. Still, despite the success, Judd made it clear, this is far from over. This was just one artery in a larger network, and you better believe we're tracking every vein, every cell. This time, we hit them hard. Next time, we'll hit them earlier. The fentanyl didn't just arrive in Polk County by accident. It was deliberately delivered, part of a calculated and highly coordinated trafficking network with its roots in Mexico, its reach in Florida, and its victims spread across the United States. According to investigators, the drugs seized during Operation Sentinel were traced to 2 of the world's most violent and powerful cartels, the Sinaloa Cartel and CJNG, Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación. These organizations aren't just drug dealers, they are corporations of death, and their product is destruction. Undercover agents and confidential informants spent months tracking the flow of fentanyl. Bricks of pills were moved from manufacturing labs in Sinaloa across the U.S.-Mexico border hidden in secret compartments of commercial trucks. From there, the drugs passed through Phoenix, where they were broken into smaller loads. Shipments then traveled through Atlanta, with couriers using personal vehicles, rental cars, and even Uber rides to avoid detection. But the final destination was clear: Florida. One of the most disturbing cases involved a courier who used his 6-year-old daughter as a decoy. He drove from Georgia to Lakeland, Florida, with 4 kilos of fentanyl pressed into counterfeit Mao-30 pills, disguised as oxycodone. At a glance, they looked identical to prescription medication. But one pill contained enough fentanyl to kill multiple adults. "It was poison dressed up as medicine," said Polk County Narcotics Commander, Lieutenant Jason Rivera. "These weren't overdoses. These were murders waiting to happen." Another suspect operated out of a laundromat in Tampa, which served as a front for cash distribution. Surveillance footage showed stacks of money being exchanged in laundry bags and delivered in sealed Tide detergent boxes. The operation was so well concealed that it ran for nearly 6 months without detection. More shocking still, some fentanyl shipments were packed inside modified car batteries. The batteries functioned normally until agents discovered that the acid cores had been replaced with vacuum-sealed fentanyl bricks wrapped in foil to avoid X-ray detection. One suspect was caught on security camera, removing a battery from his vehicle, walking into a body shop near Winter Haven, and returning 5 minutes later with an envelope of cash. "This wasn't low-level street dealing," said Sheriff Judd. "This was organized, multi-state, multi-layered trafficking, and it was happening right under our noses." Authorities also uncovered crypto-based payment systems used to launder drug profits. Several transactions were traced to digital wallets in Guatemala and Colombia. Homeland Security is now assisting in tracking those wallets to determine if international operatives are funding further U.S.-based distribution networks. Among the items seized, over 64 pounds of fentanyl, 300, zero in cash. 6 firearms, including a Glock modified for full auto, 2 encrypted smartphones, digital ledgers with code names and drop points. Agents believe that this network may be responsible for hundreds of overdoses across the southeastern United States, many involving teenagers who thought they were taking legitimate painkillers. "These pills don't come with warning labels," said D Special Agent Samantha Cortez. "You take one, and if it's a counterfeit, you're dead." The true danger, investigators say, lies in the illusion of safety. Cartel operatives are increasingly using domestic couriers, including citizens with no prior records, to make detection harder. They're exploiting open roads, weak monitoring at secondary state lines, and even family members to shield operations. "They don't just want your kids hooked," Judd warned. "They want them dead, because a dead addict doesn't talk, and a grieving family doesn't fight back." Operation Sentinel revealed just how deeply cartel networks have embedded themselves in American life. Strip malls, suburbs, school districts. They're not on the border anymore. They're already here. The numbers behind the Polk County fentanyl bust are staggering, but the lives affected are even more so. For Sheriff Grady Judd, the seizure of 64 pounds of fentanyl wasn't just a law enforcement victory. It was a grim reminder of how policy failures, from the southern border to the courtroom, are leaving Americans vulnerable to a poison pipeline that begins in cartel labs and ends in suburban neighborhoods. "This isn't just a border issue," Judd said. "It's a sentencing issue. It's a parenting issue. It's a national crisis, and it's killing our kids one pill at a time." The investigation uncovered several disturbing trends. Multiple suspects were repeat offenders, previously arrested for trafficking meth, heroin, or fentanyl, and released on light sentences or bail. One man had served just 4 years after being caught with 60 kilos of liquid meth. He was arrested again during Operation Sentinel, this time with counterfeit Mao-30 fentanyl pills and over 80 zero in cash. Another suspect had been deported twice and re-entered the U.S. illegally, using a stolen identity. He had 3 outstanding warrants in California and Texas. "How does someone with a 60-kilo bust walk free in 4 years?" Judd asked. "We're treating cartel operatives like they're shoplifters." Judd criticized what he described as a broken prosecution culture that fails to treat fentanyl crimes with the severity they deserve. In many cases, plea deals, backlogged court dockets, and insufficient sentencing laws result in traffickers returning to the streets before their victims are even buried. If a man hands a teenager a single fentanyl pill and that kid dies, he should be charged with second-degree murder, not distribution with intent. According to the Florida Medical Examiner's Office, more than 700 people died of fentanyl overdoses in the state in 2023, a 14% increase from the year prior. Nationally, the number exceeds 110. And it's not just addicts, it's high school students taking a counterfeit Adderall, young adults who think they're popping a painkiller after surgery, first-time users who never get a second chance. Judd emphasized that many of these pills are manufactured in illegal labs using industrial-grade pill presses, often bearing real pharmaceutical markings to deceive users. Some are colored and stamped to mimic Xanax, Percocet, and even candy. These cartels aren't cutting corners, they're engineering deception, Judd warned. And when your kid takes that pill, they don't overdose. They die, instantly. But the frustration doesn't end at the border or in court. It also reaches Washington. Judd joined a growing chorus of law enforcement leaders across the U.S. demanding stricter border security, with increased inspections of vehicles and shipping containers, mandatory minimum sentences for fentanyl trafficking involving death or injury, enhanced funding for anti-narcotics task forces operating at the state level, the classification of fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction when trafficked in large quantities. Critics may call his tone harsh, but for Judd, there's nothing hypothetical about this crisis. I've looked into the eyes of mothers who buried their kids over one pill. I've walked into high school gymnasiums and told teenagers that their best friend isn't coming back. This isn't politics, it's reality. And the cartels are counting on us to stay soft. Operation Sentinel showed what's possible when agencies work together, but it also exposed how easily traffickers exploit loopholes, light sentencing, and inconsistent enforcement. Until we treat every fentanyl death like a homicide, Judd said, we're just chasing ghosts while the dealers get rich. Lives are at stake, not in theory, not on the border, right here, in Polk County, in every county. And Judd made it clear, he's done asking for help. Now he's demanding it. Standing behind a podium flanked by DEA agents, FDLE officials, and Florida Highway Patrol commanders, Sheriff Grady Judd didn't waste a second sugarcoating his message. Let me say it clearly and say it loudly. If you traffic fentanyl in Florida, we will hunt you down, and when we catch you, you're not going to rehab, you're going to prison, for a long, long time. The press conference came just hours after authorities wrapped up Operation Sentinel, the largest fentanyl seizure in Polk County's history and one of the biggest in the state. For Judd, the numbers were important. But the mission wasn't about kilos or currency. It was about lives saved and lives still at risk. We took 64 pounds of fentanyl off the street, Judd said. That's enough to kill 14.5 million people. That's not a drug bust. That's a prevented massacre. As he spoke, tables behind him displayed the evidence. Vacuum-sealed bricks, counterfeit pills, guns, cash, burner phones, and photos of cartel suspects now in custody. The scope of the operation shocked even longtime investigators. Judd praised the collaborative efforts of state and federal partners, including the DEA's Project Wavebreaker and Florida's SAFE program, statewide arrest and fentanyl enforcement, supported by Governor Ron DeSantis. This was a team win, Judd said, because cartels don't care what uniform you wear, only whether you're in their way, and in Florida, I promise you, we're in their way. He confirmed that multiple suspects arrested had direct ties to Mexican cartel networks, and warned that their presence in Florida is no longer theoretical, it's operational. Judd then turned his attention directly to cartel leadership. To those running this poison from Mexico, don't think for a second that Florida is soft. Don't think for a second that you can hide in a trailer park in Lakeland or a stash house in Orlando and go unnoticed. We're watching. We're listening. and we're coming for you. He outlined new initiatives being expanded within the Polk County Sheriff's Office, a dedicated fentanyl homicide unit that will investigate every overdose as a potential murder. Increased deployment of undercover narcotics agents focused solely on counterfeit pill operations. Partnerships with school districts to educate teens on the dangers of counterfeit pills disguised as Adderall, Xanax, or oxycodone. But he also addressed the public directly, especially parents. You can't fight what you don't see. Talk to your kids. Look in their backpacks. Ask questions. Because the cartels are doing everything they can to put these pills in your homes. You need to do everything you can to stop them. The press conference ended with one of Judd's most quoted lines of the year. If you peddle fentanyl in this state, we will track you down and bury you in prison. You will not walk out. You will not get bond. And you will not leave the courtroom free. The silence in the room was heavy. Then came the final words. Words not just meant for Florida, but for every trafficker watching. There's no safe haven here. Not for cartel killers. Not for poison pushers. You come to Florida with fentanyl and you won't leave the way you came in. With that, Judd stepped down, and the war against fentanyl in Florida moved into its next phase louder, faster, and more focused than ever. Because for Grady Judd, this isn't just about policy. This is about protecting the next teenager from swallowing death. And to the cartels, the warning is now official. You're being hunted.